Well, most of us have experienced them at some point in our lives, especially as kids. Now, a new study found there could be a link between childhood nightmares and adult dementia.
Our 9 Health expert Payal Kohli joins us in studio this morning. Nightmares are really common in kids, even adults. Why?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We think there's an evolutionary reason for why kids have more nightmares, and that's because their brain is more vulnerable to fears. And if you think about what a nightmare is, it's the intersection of our fears, our emotional experiences, and our memories. And we have nightmares during a part of the cycle when we're about to wake up. It's called REM sleep. It's on the sleep-wake cusp. And that's when we're consolidating our memories. So that's one of the reasons we remember nightmares, as opposed to night terrors, where the kid will be kicking or screaming, but when you wake them up, they don't actually remember anything because it didn't happen during the part where their memories are being formed.
This is so interesting, and I think a lot of people's ears are perking up because, of course, most people as children have nightmares. What is the link between that and dementia?
Yeah, so this study published in The Lancet, a long study, looked at people born in 1958. In fact, a single week in 1958, asked their moms when they were between the ages of 7 and 11 if there were kids that were having persistent nightmares, and now looked at them as adults at 50 years old. And if you had persistent nightmares between 7 and 11, you have a 76% higher chance of having cognitive impairment as an adult, and almost a 7-fold higher risk of having Parkinson's dementia as an adult.
Wow.
But how do you get rid of having
Right, exactly. That's my question.
Those are terrible numbers, but like, what can you do?
So here's the question we're asking in the scientific community. Is this an association or is this a causation?
Okay.
In other words, is the brain just kind of warning us because there's some shared genetic predisposition to nightmares and to dementia that, hey, you may have a problem as an adult? Or is something about the fact that your sleep is being disrupted when we know a lot of the healing processes happen as a child when the brain is developing, leading to dementia as an adult? So that's going to really help us answer the question about what we should do in kids that are having nightmares.
Oh, well, so what if I constantly remember my nightmares, though? That means my memory's doing pretty well.
That means that your brain consolidates those memories really well during sleep. Now, it's not a nightmare here or there.
Right.
So I don't want everyone to worry because
Right.
everybody has a nightmare here or there.
Yes.
It's these persistent nightmares, this persistent disruptive sleep. In fact, even we see it as adults. We know that the adults who have nightmares have higher underlying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, but that can often be a precursor to even conditions like Alzheimer's dementia. So if you have a child that has nightmares or you're an adult that has persistent nightmares, what we're suggesting is a really good idea to actually talk to a sleep medicine physician to try to see if some of the cognitive therapy, the behavioral therapy, changing your sleep patterns can affect you to get better quality sleep.
Is there any research about adults having nightmares too, or is this solely focused on, this one was focused on kids, but you know, why kids versus adults having nightmares?
No, adults absolutely have nightmares, and
Right.
in fact, they think that certain types of adults have more nightmares. So the ones that have these underlying mental health conditions, substance abuse disorders, but that can often happen as a precursor to that development of dementia. So again, hard to know if the brain is just kind of warning you that something's not working right in the circuitry and it's headed towards that, or it's somehow causing that to happen.
The nightmares are disrupting your sleep in some kind of way.
Exactly right. So
I think so much of it has to do with the developing brain, right? Like, it's because you're looking at kids when their brains are still developing and seeing what's happening long term. When you say, you know, like if you have a nightmare here or there, that's one thing, but like, how many, like per week or something like that, would be like, this is an issue?
I would say persistent troublesome, so multiple a week.
Okay.
So if you just have one a month or one every other week, probably okay. But if you're concerned as a parent, and especially for you, Corey, sometimes kids don't even necessarily share what they're having. It may be a good idea to actually ask your child, how did you sleep? Did you dream about anything? You know, what were the things you were thinking about when you were dreaming? Because that gives you some insight into how that brain is not just developing, but also repairing itself, which is one of the big functions of what our brain does during sleep.
Well, boy, I'm going to have to take my therapist to see a sleep doctor with me. And we have a lot to go into here, Dr.
You have to tell us about your nightmares,
Yes.
Jordan.
Oh, man, do I have them. We will share those all one day.
Dr. Kohli, thanks for coming in.